Hi and welcome to this Mindful Direct Seed Sowing Masterclass. So today I'm going to walk you through my FLOTS framework, which is my mindful gardening framework. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the equipment that you're going to use for this activity. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about my 6 L's method for actually doing the activity. So if you are new here, then welcome. My name is Kendall Platt and I'm the Mindful Gardening Coach. I help women who struggle to switch off, stop doing all the things they feel they should be doing, and instead take a moment to slow down through mindful gardening. Now, this masterclass that I am bringing to you is one of the 12 or so masterclasses that my Mind in Bloom program attendees, members have access to. But this obviously is, it's a masterclass in itself as well. So, to get started then, because we've only got 30 minutes, I know we're all really busy, so we need to make the most of our time here. The FLOTS framework, what is it? So you can use this when you're doing any kind of mindful gardening activity as a way to help you find calm more quickly. So the FLOTS, so F stands for feel. What can you feel? So whenever you're doing what you're doing, God, it's hot out here actually. What can you feel? So for example, here we're going to be looking at what does the soil feel like? So actually, when I've got it in my hand here, it feels quite damp, which is impressive, isn't it? Because it's been quite sunny the last couple of days, so I'm quite surprised by that it feels quite damp. So, it's really engaging your senses. If you are holding onto a trowel, for example, what does the trowel feel like in your hand? The L then is listen. So what can you hear? So if I'm just quiet for a second, hopefully you can hear the bird song there. But it's also things like as you're digging in the ground, or depending on the activity you're doing, can you actually hear a sound? So it's really focusing on all those things that you can hear whilst you're doing the activity. The O then is observe. So use your eyes. In a minute, we're going to be really engaging our eyes in some of the activities that we're going to be doing. The T is taste. Now, we're probably not going to be using that one today, but certainly as your harvests start to grow and you go into the greenhouse and you pluck a ripe tomato and you taste that, that is going to really come into its own there. And then the last one then is S, which is smell. So what can you smell? Again, once your flowers start blooming, these frames here that you can see, I'm going to be growing loads of sweet peas up. So once they are in bloom, they will be smelling absolutely beautiful. So that, some of these are going to really come into their own as the season progresses. So today's mindful gardening activity is direct seed sowing. So what equipment do you need for this? Now, I've split this down into a couple of things. You should have your guide that you get as part of this, and all of this information is written down in the guide, so don't worry about taking notes. So I've split it into essential equipment, so something that you're definitely going to need, and then I've also put a couple of bits in there that are kind of nice to have. If you want to go out and buy those things, you can, but you don't need to. So the essential equipment, you're going to need a patch of ground. So I'm going to be using this bit of ground here because my sweet pea is going to grow up here. And then this is actually going to be quite shady here. And the thing that I'm going to be planting, a particular variety of lettuce that doesn't mind a bit of shade. So in order to maximize all the space I've got available to myself, I'm planting something here that doesn't mind a bit of shade. So you either need a patch of ground, or you could do this in like a relatively big container or one of those long containers filled with compost. So it depends what you're growing. You are going to need a plant label. You are going to need a watering can and water, or some method of getting water onto your patch of ground. You're going to need your seeds, and you're probably going to need a pen to write your plant label, and then a trowel or some kind of implement in order to kind of make your drill, which is your straight line that we're going to make in the soil in a minute that you're going to sow along. The nice to haves then are a string line and pegs. So I'm going to show you how to use all of these things in a minute. So these are literally the pegs and it's a piece of string. It's not fancy. You could use 2 twigs from the ground and a piece of string for this. So it's not difficult at all. Then a rake as well. So this is a really basic one, literally just there. It will break up all the nice lumps of soil. And then I've put a straight 2 centimetre wide piece of wood. Now, this kind of thing is what I'm thinking. Or depending on the size of your seeds, you could just use a garden cane. So this is going to be placed into the soil to make the line in the soil to sow along. So it really depends what your method that you choose to do is. But like I said, I'm going to show you all of them. So the 6 L's method then, this can be used every time you come to direct seed sow. The L's are to remind you of the steps of things to do, but at each stage you should be trying to engage that FLOTS framework to get that kind of maximum relaxation. On the second page of your workbook as well, I have given you a list of all of the seeds that I direct sow throughout the growing season. Obviously, there's many more that you can add to that as well. So feel free to print that guide out, add your extra ones on there as well. But I've also included the months that I sow them in as well, because I think sometimes it's hard to know when they can actually be sown. The thing with direct seed sowing is that the soil needs to be about 7 degrees before the seeds will germinate. So actually that means there's a relatively short window for seed sowing. So I don't really start to sow direct until around April. And then I sow again in May. I sow some things in June. Then July and August, it's just too hot really. You can do it, but it just means constant watering. So I tend not to sow anything then. And I wait until the weather cools again. And then I sow some more things in September, ready for them to then overwinter to flower the following year. So actually, from a direct sowing point of view, there's not, there's not loads of sowing to do. So the first L then, because it's the 6 L's method, is loosen. So I want you to break up any lumps of compost or soil that you've got in your area that you're going to grow. So you've got a consistency that's like breadcrumbs. That's what you're aiming for. Now, in garden soil, you're going to have things like that. I've got some bark that I put as a mulch on this bed last year, or bits of stone as well. So you want to try and remove those, because if they're in your soil where you're going to try and sow and a seed lands onto that bark or onto that stone, it's really unlikely to germinate. So generally germination rates with direct sown seeds are going to be lower than those sown in a controlled environment in the greenhouse. But it's obviously a huge time saver because you're not, transplanting plants here, there and everywhere. It means you haven't got to sow in pots and clean the pots and all of that sort of stuff. And also some plants just prefer to be sown direct into the ground and just kind of left to get on with doing their thing. So there's a few ways that you can do this. You can use your hands, so you can sit and break up the clods of dirt and just crumble them. And actually, from a mindful point of view, that is a really, really lovely way to do it. You can also use your rake. So, if you have got a rake and you want to save a little bit of time, you literally just rake along. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing there. And you can probably see that I'm collecting up all the kind of stones and lumps of things there. And I'm basically just kind of scraping off that top surface. But you can see, hopefully, the consistency of the soil that I've got in the majority is really nice, kind of loose and like breadcrumbs. That's what we're going for. There will be some stones because I'm on a naturally quite a stony soil here, but generally, as long as it's okay, I'm pretty happy. Okay, so you've done that then. So the next one then is line. Now this is where you're going to make your line to sow along. Now you could just go for it straight away and sow, but chances are your line will be a bit wibbly, or you might veer off in a funny direction. The reason we sow in lines, and they're quite often called drills, you might have seen that referred to in gardening books. The reason we do that is because it enables us to see what is our seedlings and what is our and what is our any weeds that are popping up around our seedlings, because in theory, if they're along the line of the drill that you've drawn, they're likely to be your seedlings. But if they're elsewhere in the bed, then they're probably weeds, and you can just whip them out before they get too big, and then, you know, hamper the progress of your plants. Okay, so there's a few different ways you can do your lines. You can use your piece of wood like this, and what you can do is you literally just place it onto the soil. I'm just thinking I'm going to sow my sweet peas there, so I'm going to just do that there, and you're literally just pressing it down. Okay, just wiggling it back and forth, putting a good bit of weight along it, and then when you lift it up, you can see, hopefully you can see there, there's quite a good line left. Okay, there's a little bit of a dip there. You can do that, you could do that a bit more if you wanted to, depending on how deep the soil, the drill is that you want to sow into. Now mine, I'm just going to cover that back over to show you the next one. Now mine is, mine are small, quite small seeds, being lettuce seeds. So another option for me would be to use my string line. So I'd literally just place that there, and I would pull the string tight and place it there, and then I've got a really nice straight line to draw against. So there's, you could use your finger to do that if you wanted to, but I'm going to use my trowel. So I'm literally just going to go along like that. Oh, got a bit wobbly there. And you know, you will go a little bit wobbly because there'll be things underneath the soil, that stones and things that get in your way. Right, there we go. So if I just pull that out, then you'll see that there's a really nice line in the soil there. Okay, now my last one I'm going to show you is using the garden cane. So right, there we go. Okay, now I've got a bit of a dip there, but see there, I'm just putting quite a bit of pressure on. There we go, and I've got my nice dip there. Now these seeds say they want to be about 1 centimetre under the ground, so that's probably good like that. Right, so that's your line. Hopefully that makes sense. The next L then is lubricate. Now, bit of a strange word, but I couldn't think of anything else that started with an L. But basically what you're going to do here is you're going to water your drill before you sow your seeds. Now, the reason for this is if we were to sow the seeds and then cover them with soil and then water, that there's a quite high chance that because the seeds are quite small, they might get dislodged and move about. So we're going to water our drill first. Now, this is even more important when you're sowing later in the season and the soil's quite dry, and really give it a good wetting. So grab my watering can here. And I'm going to use a rose on the top to get quite a it's going to be all wet now where I'm going to sit, isn't it? Right, so there we go. So it's nice and damp. Okay, the next one then is lay. And this is when you are going to lay your seedlings along your line. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can do this. Depending on the seeds, you can either place the seeds at different intervals. So if you've got slightly bigger seeds, you might want to do that. So something like peas, beans, or even beetroot, actually, the seeds of those, you know, it's quite easy to kind of take hold of and place. The bonus of that is that you can space them out, which means because very often when you direct sow, so for example, the lettuce seeds that I'm going to show you here are quite small. So I'm going to sprinkle these along, but that will mean that I will, because it's quite difficult to space them when they're so small, chances are what that will mean is that I will end up with more plants, more of the seeds germinating than I can actually grow. Now, on the back of packets, you will see this one says, when large enough to handle, thin out seedlings to 30 centimetres apart. So that means that between each plant, eventually, there's going to be 30 centimetres, which is quite a big gap. So I don't want to waste too many seeds. But as I said, the germination rates on outdoor seeds are not quite so good. So you do need to sow a few more in order to make sure you get enough plants. So I've got my seeds there, and as I tip them out onto my hand, I'm going to really take notice of what they look like. So these are really fascinating, actually. I've never grown this variety before. The seeds are all very similar, so you're looking for things like, are they all the same shape, size, colour? So these ones actually are, but each little seed has got these really funny individual lines on, which is really fascinating. So you're just noticing the colours, the shapes, the textures of the skin, of the seed coat. And then all you're going to do is I'm going to take them. Now, because I'm going to be eventually thinning these to 30 centimetres, I'm going to try and, you know, drop 1 or 2 every few centimetres. Oh, I dropped about 6 then. And it's this concentrating on what you're actually, you know, doing in the moment that allows your brain to switch off, allows you to kind of find a little bit of calm, because you're not thinking about, you know, what to cook for dinner, or that meeting with your boss you had yesterday, or you know, what you must remember to put dishwasher tablets on the shopping list, or, you know, just all the inane crap that goes through our heads all the time when we really don't need it to. Right, there we go. So I've literally just effectively sprinkled them along the line. So just wrapping them up, I'm going to put them away then. Okay, so then the next one is layer, and this is covering the seed with the soil. Now, because I've pressed down into the soil, and you can see the line down in there, it's made these kind of little ridges either side. So it's up to you. You can either use those to kind of cover over, so just kind of cover over like that, okay? Or if you wanted to, you could get some separate compost and sprinkle that along the line. Now, people sometimes like to do that because it differentiates between the garden soil and the compost, and it makes it easier to see where your line is. But in theory, you know, you shouldn't need to do that. And also, this soil is, it's easy. It's kind of easier to, if you use compost, it's easier to kind of sprinkle. So you can see there, it's quite dry, and it will sprinkle a bit easier. But I want to have some nice moist soil on top of my seedling. So I'm going to use the stuff just alongside that wetted it. And you're literally just sprinkling it along there like that. Hands are going to be filthy after this, but hey, there's a bacteria in soil that helps us to, that actually reduces levels of the stress hormone. So I'm all for getting my hands in the soil. Okay, there we go. Now, the last section then, that's all covered up there. The last L then is label. Now, this is really, really key, because you can see here I've only got one line, so I'm probably going to remember that I've sown this particular variety of lettuce. But in my new kitchen garden, which is being built this weekend, I'm going to have lots of different lines of vegetables growing alongside each other. And when you've got lots, it's really, really important that you label, especially because so many seedlings, when they first pop up, look exactly the same. And when you're trying to then thin them, which is when you pull out the excess seedlings, if you can't remember what it was that you've sown, it's really difficult to know how much to thin them. So we make sure that we've got our label, and some people put a label at one end and at the other end as well. It's completely up to you how you do it. I'm just going to do one at this end. There we go. Pop that in there. And then that is the end of the direct sowing for now. Like everything in gardening, we need to wait a little bit of time for Mother Nature to do her thing. Keep coming to check on them. If you do a kind of daily garden wander, just to have a little bit of headspace and a little 5 minutes to start the beginning of your day, then come and check in on them every day or every other day, and just see, see for those little seed heads popping up. If the weather stays as nice and warm as it is, that could be quite quickly. But if it is, is according to the weather going to go a bit colder, so they might take a little bit more time. But just keep coming and checking on them, and then eventually you will see either the seeds popping up along your line or other little plants popping up around, which the chances are weeds, so hoik them out as soon as you see them. But eventually, once all your, once you see a few popping up, that's when you're going to want to start thinning the plants. And that literally just means getting hold of, say you've got one here and you've got one here. That's about 30 centimeters, and then you've got like 5 in between. You just want to go along and literally pull those out of the ground and get rid of them. You can try and replant them elsewhere, but I find they never do as well. So yeah, so that's why, don't just sow loads and loads of seeds like off the bat. Try and space them a little bit out if you can, because ultimately the seeds need their space to grow. So anyway, I hope that has been useful, and you go and direct sow your seeds. A few examples of some things that I'm going to be sowing in April. I'm going to be sowing things like beetroot, carrots, lettuce, spinach, chard, radishes. Mainly I'm going to be sowing radishes for my little girl. I don't really like to eat them, but they grow really quickly, so that will keep her engaged in the garden. Turnips, things like peas, spring onions, rocket, coriander, parsley. So there's so many things that you can sow, and with many of these I will actually sow them every month through the growing season, because that means I will have beetroot all summer long, or carrots all summer long. It's called successional sowing. So that's something to get used to as well. Flower wise, I really prefer to direct sow things like calendula, because they just do really well doing that. Things like larkspur much prefer to be sown straight away in the soil rather than transferred. Nigella and poppies as well. So they're some of my key ones. But like I said, on your guide, you've got a whole list of exactly what I'm going to be sowing in April, May, June and September. So you can do exactly the same, or you can add some other things in there. But happy direct sowing. If you are not yet a member of Mind in Bloom, then do send me a message and I can send you the link and we can have a little chat about getting you involved. Like I said, you'll get access to all of my mindful gardening masterclasses, and you'll get a monthly gardening activity mindful gardening activity sent to you in the post, and you'll get the support directly from me within our private Facebook group, so you can send me any gardening questions that you have at any point. Have a lovely time in your garden. See you later. Thanks so much. Bye.